I'm finally going to finish reading the last few pages of The House of Impossible Beauties by Joseph Cassara. And I have a fantastic, fabulous soundtrack to go along with my reading today. And now I feel like a real, legitimate New Yorker with Caribbean family that be going to the bashment party, because seriously, it's jamming out here today. Like real dance hall music. And I'm just kinda like, it's cool, real bashmenting. Let's wrap this book up. Finally, finally, finally. Done. And I'm finally ready to give my thoughts on this book. Great cover, beautiful cover. Beautiful cover, beautiful cover. I loved the characters. I loved the story. I loved being able to read, to really get into New York ball culture and kind of get some of that history and get like some of the history of one of the most prominent houses in ball culture, the extravaganzas. And I believe the first Latinx house in ball culture, because I think prior to that, most of the other houses were black, or they were kind of a mixture. Extravaganzas were the first Latinx house in ball culture. A lot of important names within ball culture are in the story. From the extravaganzas, there's Angel, there's Venus, there's Hector, there's also Pepe Le Beige also comes up. Because reading this a lot had me going like, yo, Paris is burning. Like I can see all these characters. I can see them like, because watching Paris is Burning, you got an first time insight into ball culture, but the more that you like in reading this, you kind of feel like you're getting a lot of the backstory of what you couldn't see, like the questions that came up in your mind after you watched the Paris is Burning documentary. And I'm just like, yo, I want, like now I'm like, I after this I'm going to rewatch Paris is Burning, and I'm going to rewatch Pose. I still haven't watched the last episode of Pose, and I really want to rewatch it and watch that last episode before the new season starts. I enjoyed this book despite not liking the writing. I felt like the writing was just very, it was almost like a little too dreamlike. It was just a little too, I don't know, it just made me feel like I was kind of far away from the characters. Like I was there, but it was just kind of, I felt a little tethered to the characters. Like I was far away from them, but I was not like really with them, you know. And it for me, it was kind of like in the beginning of the book, it was kind of like bothersome. And I get that it's Joseph's first book, and maybe this is exactly what he's going for. A lot of what he's writing, how he wrote this book, was just very much what he was going for. I just was not a fan of it. I just felt like some of the writing was just, it could have been fine-tuned a little bit more. It could have been a little bit more restructured and edited, and just a little bit more on point and cleaned up. I will say this book is very character driven. When it got to like part 2 of the book, or book 2 within the book, I felt like things got, it kind of amped up for me. It was like a little bit more interesting for me to read. I was just a lot more like connected and engaged with characters. Part two of the book, The House. It really started connecting with me, and one of the things that I loved a lot was Dorian's story. Was Dorian whenever he came in, and like, cause Dorian, like in part two, when Dorian started like speaking, I was just very much engaged with what he had to say, because it felt it felt so much more authentic and more just honest and bold to what New York City is, what ball culture is. It just felt alive. It brought everything to life. Like part one of it, it was good. It was great seeing the Angel and Hector's romance and how it started and blossomed Hector's family life. Or, well, I don't really think we got Hector's family life, but we got Angel's family life. And getting that backstory and building up their relationship and starting this house and meeting and connecting as a family, as a house, and as a gang, and as just a force in ballroom culture. Like, I was just like, it was great seeing their start. Being that I read this for the reading circle that I'm a part of, Queer People of Color Reading Circle, they brought up something that I have to agree with when it comes to Dorian's character. In the same vein of The Book Thief, where Death was the narrator of the story, I almost felt like Dorian could have been the narrator of the story. Like, although he wasn't all knowing, he wasn't like in everybody's business, connected to everybody. Dorian could have been he could have been a framing device to carry the story. And I think that would have helped when it came to some of the generic dialogue too, or like how I perceived the writing and the story from the beginning. I would have preferred it to just be like Dorian Corey comes in and says, "I'm a fabulous queen, I'm that girl, I want to tell you the story about this house that kind of sprang from my own fabulousness without me even like, you know, just by me existing, it was my fabulousness that kind of helped bring extravaganza to life." As it got closer to the end, in the third part of the book, things just got really traumatic, just like a little sadder, a bit more depressing, a little bit more. At that point, you're like invested in these characters, you're so connected to them, and to see them going through the things that they're going through, you're just like so invested. And and in a way it might be a little triggering because there's lots of drug use. There is, I almost want to say aggressive sex, but aggressive sex doesn't mean like it's a bad thing. It just means that, but in this case it's like there's like sexual assault. It's just a lot of intense things happen in the story. It's the 80s in New York, and the 80s in New York is crazy. It's wild. It's like, I've heard some stories and I've seen some documentaries and videos. The 80s was something else, girl. And there was just like a lot of tragic losses and stuff. So I will say there are some trigger warnings. It was just sad, but it's so real, because it's real to what New York was like in the 80s, early 90s, to what happens to what has happened, and it's still happening to LGBTQ people in New York and just in America, and how they have to survive without the support of their own families. And it's a beautiful thing. This is like a huge found family story. You're coming together with a family that you weren't born into, but that you kind of chose, and you're connected to and growing with, and they're kind of nurturing you in a way that the actual family that you were born with is not nurturing you. I enjoyed the story for that. I enjoyed the story for those beautiful moments of friendship, family, of seeing ball culture and the history of it. I loved the moment when Juanito was in that ball, walk the ball. It was beautiful just to kind of see to really get the atmosphere of a ball and people that were there, the music, all of it. Like, I just love that, and I do wish there was more of that within the story, more of like them like going to balls and winning trophies and walking categories and stuff like that. I wish there was more of that within the book. But beyond that, I just loved it. I loved the book. I do have my issues with it where I just was not in love with the writing. I felt like characters and scenes could have been a little bit more described and fleshed out, or at least kind of sprinkled in better to kind of set those scenes and set up who those characters were, so that we really got a vision of them in our heads, instead of like we already started making a vision because we're so deeply entrenched in this character, and now you're kind of trying to give me some details on this character later on, you know, and now I'm just like, okay, now I'm confused about what I should do because I already set this person up in my head one way, and then you kind of trying to flip it for me, so it's like, no, it's not gonna work. I guess through the voice that he used for each character, it kind of gave a visual essence of who they are. You know, you could kind of picture them just by how he wrote, how their actions and how they spoke. You kind of picture it, but at the same time it was still like, I need a little bit more description. I need a little bit more. I did love being able to experience just New York in the 80s through this book, and how gritty and dirty and intense and scary it is. Those like really, really dirty parts of New York. Because New York is so much different from how it was in the 80s. Giuliani came through and cleaned it up. Disneyfied it, like the people used to say. He came and Disneyfied it. It was just so much more grittier and messier, and now it's just so much more, it's all cleaned up, and it's very, very, like, a lot of white people live there with their kids, and they go running, and it's a park and shit like that, and it's cute or whatever, but there are no people of color. Gentrification, girl. It's a whole nother story. I enjoyed this book. I am so glad that I got to read it with the QPOC reading circle, and I am looking forward to our next book, which is another period piece, Gentleman Jigger. I am not fully sure what this is about. So far I understand it is a book set in the 1920s about being black creatives in Harlem during the Harlem Renaissance and making a way and being creative and artistic and all that fun stuff. I'm looking forward to reading this and getting into it, and I hope I enjoy it. I hope I enjoy it. I hope I enjoy the writing. I hope the writing is a little bit